All right, guys, I just want to do a quick webinar before I pass the stream over to Philip for the afternoon. I have a few topics I wanted to cover as requested by a few of our members. So starting with, someone was asking, how do I scan for stocks? Hopefully he's listening to this. If not, it's going to be recorded so we can go back over it. But I noticed a lot of people do very complicated scans. And for me, I really keep it simple in terms of what I'm looking for. As far as long setups go, I have a 4-point piece of criteria that I look for. Basically, the stock just needs to be up over 5% and over VWAP. So once you see something like ROKU, which is broken VWAP, at this point I'm more or less looking for shorts. Like I might short a bounce, something like that. I get on the short side, and then basically just any stock that's over 5% on the day. So up here on the percentage change scanner, it's up over 5%. And it's doing above average volume. Now, typically, if a stock is up over 10% of the day, it will be doing above average volume. But if you want to check the average volume on a stock, you can do so by pulling up FinViz, typing in the ticker, and it gives you all kinds of information. Like you can basically look at the institutional ownership, and let's just look at like ZGNX, for example. You can see the average volume down below is only 500,000 shares on average per day, and today it's traded 10 million shares and it's up 115%, so that makes sense, right? Highly owned by institutions, 90% institutionally owned, and I'm guessing they're selling it today because it's been fading most of the day. But the criteria I'm looking for is really simple. I'm looking for stocks over 5%, over VWAP, doing volume. The correction consolidation, this is for my late day setups, which I'm going to explain later. So basically, as far as scanning goes, guys, I use TC2000 for my charts and my scanner. The scanner setup is very simple. I'm just looking for basically anything up over 5%, and doing over 50,000 shares is what I use in the morning. But by this time at lunch, I don't want to touch anything that's done less than 1.5 million. So I increase it to 1.5 million at around 11 a.m. And how do I scan? Well, it's really simple from there. I just go through every chart. And I have, a few patterns that I really look for each and every day. So these patterns that I play, you can learn about those, easily by watching the stream for a week. You'll start to get the hang of them. You can go through the video lessons in our members portal. If you click in the members portal on the website, there's 8 main video lessons. Those cover a few of the setups and some of the risk management strategies that I use. I just start from the top of the list and just start going down and say what looks good to me. Like as someone that's been trading for over 10 years, I have exactly the charts in mind that, tend to do the best for me. And those are the ones that I go after. As you guys know, a lot of my trades are shorts. And a lot of them are very similar in nature to where I get in, a prior support become resistance. A lot of time I'll get in a place like that with VWAP, for example. But I just go through the top gainers, starting from the top, and just go work my way down. And then if any of them sort of catch my attention, so I'm like, okay, well, HMMY is interesting, I might flag it, and then go down, and Sun W looks bad. INFI is up, it hasn't had a correction yet, so maybe I'll flag that one. I just do that, just go through, and obviously you need to know sort of what you're looking for, which depends on what kind of trader you are, or if you're just trying to play the same setups as me, you can obviously just follow my stream and my trades if you want. But that brings me to the support and resistance question. Someone was asking like what time frames do I use, and I use them all. So usually what I start by doing is I'll zoom out on the daily chart. The first thing I usually do is the biggest time frame. So like what's a trade from this morning that we would be interested in? Bad example because this is in no man's land. What did we have yesterday? ZYNE. Okay, this is a great example. ZYNE. First thing I did yesterday. So I'm just going to do all the support and resistance lines that I would normally do. First thing I did yesterday when I noticed it was gapping up, aside from take out borrows because I knew it was going to be a great short, was I plotted on the daily chart. I zoomed the daily chart way out, and then I plotted what I thought to be the main sort of support or resistance that was close by. And to me, you can see that 1350-ish just in this area, like 1360, 1350 was a huge resistance back here, and then it became a huge support. And on top of that, it was also the gap close, the gap fill. And it actually, the pre-market data is not showing on my chart right now, but it actually did completely, it's not showing here, but in pre-market yesterday, it completely filled that gap. It touched it perfectly. And then started to fade instantly from there. So the pre-market was like way back up here, and it faded all pre-market. And then, we got our entry on the morning spike short, which is a very typical setup that we take a lot of the times right there. Pretty much nailed it within 5-10 cents of the top of that candle, and it was an all-day hold. So first thing I do is I plot the main daily chart. I don't put too many lines in the daily. I just want the main spot that could be, resistance, and then maybe one that could be support. And you can see right there, 1070 was a resistance support. And so these are, to me, these are the two mains. And then I'll go into the intraday chart on a 1 minute or 2 minute or 5 minute. Then once we have some chart data on the day, I'll start plotting those lines too. So you can kind of see, in this case, 1025 is a huge area. It was support back here, and then it became resistance, and it's just that's a really clear area of importance on this chart. And right here, where there was support, become resistance, and then finally the 950 area that was support from yesterday. So that's basically what typically my chart's going to look like. And then I'm going to usually make decisions or trades often based off those areas in terms of my risk management and entries. So for example, if ZYNE, which I was interested in shorting today, opens weak, I may be looking for a bounce into that resistance for a short, especially if there's like VWAP and stuff like that. So this was an example of, this is actually I'm surprised I didn't go after this one today. I thought it was going to open strong because it opened over 10 and it was looking good for that pop. So my idea today was short into 1040 and then watch it fade all day. Super easy trade, right? But kind of threw me off how it opened. It looked like it was going to open strong, then it opened weak. Something got me thinking like, well, this might actually ramp back up and catch some shorts off guard, and I just decided not to take it. Usually my gut feeling is right, so I tend to go with my gut sometimes. But if I was going to take the trade, the idea would have been to short into a bounce. Typically, I'd be using some kind of resistance line from previous chart data, and then maybe like the VWAP. And the idea is I short into like a pop like this so that the risk is minimized. So, something like short 80 to 85, maybe risk off 95 or 10. So something like, between 8 and 16 cents a share is what I usually risk on a trade like this. To get some ideas of the types of trades that I go after, or if you want to see like what kind of risk reward I usually go for, you can actually see literally every single trade I've taken on the stream since August 1st right here. So these are all fairly typical trades. Risk 15 cents to make a buck, stuff like that. And then, what you'll notice is the losses column. Where there's losses, they tend to be a lot smaller than the winners. And again, that really comes down to my risk management strategy. So pinpointing entries, taking some quick profits usually to lock in a profit, then trying to let the rest ride. But by mitigating the risk, a lot of the times the winners are going to be a lot bigger than the losers, as you can see. So a lot of big wins in early August, and then some small, just tiny, like 10, 12 cent. And occasionally I'll take a slightly bigger loss, but usually it's something like slippage or something like that. Like you can see here, there's no loss. Basically in all of August, that's over 20 cents a share. And there's plenty of trades that are 50, 60, 80 cents a share wins, right? So August was a really good month overall. And September was also a really good start. Really good trades there. I took a 36-cent loss on NL and K, but that was kind of a dumb trade that I decided to trade against my system, which deservingly resulted in a loss on that one. But as you can see, just go through this list if you want to get an idea, and you'll see where I entered, where my stop loss was, and where my best exit was. So you can kind of get a feel for the risk reward, which is usually like a big part of what I do here is try to identify trades where I can risk, 10, 15 cents to make 40, 50, 60 cents a share. So it's all about really identifying and finding trades that will maximize my risk with very little reward. So even if you do take 2 or 3 stops at 10 cents a share per stop, the next trade will wipe those out, right? I'm not going to go on too much longer, guys. I know you're trying to focus, but if you are new to the group, I just wanted to say welcome. Sorry for a slow morning. We had a really nice one on ZYNE yesterday. Today, the idea was to go for the continuation. Unfortunately, again, I missed it, but Trade Addict, his name's Philip. He is an excellent trader. He started with us. He traded before he started with us, but he started with us about 8 or 12 months ago, I think, by now. And he really has done well since he started with us. So occasionally I love to have him on the stream. His strategy is a little bit different than mine, so just keep that in mind that he uses smaller size and wider stops. So it's really not exactly the same strategy that I use. So if you do happen to be following him, just remember that he is using he trades bigger picture with smaller size and wider stops. But for me, I try to pinpoint my entries within 15-20 cents, and I use slightly bigger size, I think. So anyways, AKTX is an example of what I was looking for today in ZYNE. I was looking for that morning spike into resistance. And I like to use, to the person that was asking about the support and resistance lines, the stuff that lines up on the 2-minute chart, it's still going to be the same on the 5-minute chart. It's still going to be the same on the 15-minute chart. So I typically just look for the 2 main areas on the daily, 1 or 2 main areas of resistance and support that could be of interest intraday from the daily chart, and then start plotting just the main levels on the intraday chart. And so hopefully that helps. And again, as far as scanning goes, really simple. The criteria is very simple on my scanner. I don't see why people complicate it so much. If the stock's doing volume, it's up on the day, I'm looking for a chart that I can trade. So I'm looking for a specific setup. As far as just to go over one, for example, like a late day setup. So again, here's my long setup, right? I like the stock to be up on the day, so there's interest in it. It's doing above average volume, which again, if it's up over 5 or 10%, there's typically going to be some volume in it. The 3 and 4, correction and consolidation and low risk entry, these are basically criteria that I'm looking for in stocks that have ran up big in the morning. So what I typically want them to do, because I don't chase momentum in the morning long, I like to trade setups. So stuff where the risk is really low, and when you're chasing momentum like this, the risk is high, and your risk of stopping out or taking losses are much higher, getting caught in a candle like that, for example. So what I look for is I look for stocks that have run up nicely in the morning and then have had a full, nice pullback over lunch. One of my main trading rules is I don't trade on the long side, and this is going to be really helpful to you new traders because I'm sure a lot of you guys do get caught. It used to happen to me all the time. I noticed from journaling my trades, from paying attention to my data, that I was losing between, and again, guys, just to remind you, I started prop trading 11 years ago, so this data is old, but it still just holds true today for me. It's that this afternoon breakouts tend to not work well. So I typically stop going long. If I can get a trade in the morning where the stock runs up, pulls back, consolidates, that's kind of the pattern I'm looking for right here. So if the stock in the first 30 minutes runs up, has a pullback, finds support, finds a higher low, then I will take that as trade. Usually the buy is going to be somewhere in here, and the stop just under this last higher low. So that's a very, very common chart pattern for me. So again, when I'm scanning, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for charts that look like they could have that setup, right? So if I go through my scan and I see a stock that had a big run up and it's starting to pull back, I'll flag it and start watching to see if it holds a higher low and then see if it sets up this pattern. This is one of my favorite patterns to play on the long side, but I also like it. So this is, just imagine this as being like a 1.5 hour time frame. So this is the first 30 minutes, pulls back. This is like an hour into the day, and then we're ripping towards 11 a.m. Where finally at 11 a.m., usually these stocks tend to top out between 11 and 12. So if this is like the 11 to 12 o'clock area, then I'll sell it off. I rarely ever hold long past noon unless there's major volume. But what I'll do is I'll sell it off because I expect over lunch that the stock will pull back. And so this is what I'm looking for my late afternoon setup. So I typically only trade, again, long in the first hour and a half of the day, in the last 2 hours. So what I'm looking for in the last 2 hours is Again, basically right here, I'm looking for the stock to do a correction and consolidation over lunch. All right, guys, I'm just going to pull up this whiteboard and give you a really typical example of what I trade on the long side. So again, if we're talking about the first hour of the day, I'm looking for a run up in the first 30 minutes, a pullback, find some support, and as soon as it finds that support, I'll plot it on my chart. You'll see me draw the line on the chart, and then I'm kind of looking for it to hold a higher low and then start to curl. So again, in this case, the buy area, a lot of people buy through the top of the prior peak. If the volume's there, I like to buy it early, somewhere in here. That way the risk is super low because the stop is just below that last higher low. And instead of buying it through this area, I like to sell some into that area. So that's sort of like the pattern I'm looking for on, and imagine this being the first 2 hours of the day, and then by 11 a.m., I'm expecting it to pull back and correct. So that's the first typical long setup I look for in the morning. The afternoon setup, and I don't trade these until after 1:30 p.m. So again, no trades long for me between essentially 11:30 and 1:30, except for in extreme situations where there's major volume. Okay, so if the stock has a big run up in the morning, and then we pull back into lunch, and let's just draw a VWAP line. This is like a VWAP right here. I'm typically looking for the stock to find some support. So basically let it hit VWAP and then just let it consolidate. So what I mean by consolidate is basically looking for the stock to trade sideways within a range. And then going into, just make this line say like 1 p.m. If it's starting to sort of perk up after 1 towards 1:30, then I'm interested in looking for a long setup with set risk off one of the higher lows and anticipating that 2 p.m. breakout. So the best time to go for breakouts, in my experience, is going to be between 1:30 and 2 p.m. Let me show you an example of what happens more often than not, and I'm going to say like 85% of the time. More often than not, say 85% of the time, afternoon breakouts are going to end like this. See how AMMA yesterday was setting up, and it looked like a really great setup there, but the time of day was just wrong. It was 12:30, it broke out by like 10 cents. Prematurely broke out, rejected, and then faded all day. So very, very typical, right? Now, if this exact same setup was going into 2 p.m., I definitely would have traded it, and I suspect that it would have ran a lot more into the close. So that's just like basically two of the main long setups that I go after. As you guys know, I do trade a lot more on the short side, and I'm really strict with my criteria for the long trades because I just here's an example of here's a really good example. ALDX. This stock had a nice little run up. We're going into 2 p.m., which is the right time of day. It consolidated over lunch. You can see this sideways action just before 2 p.m. It started to perk. We got a buy on it, and it broke out over 2 p.m. and ran into the close. So that's a very typical chart pattern for me. So there's just like a little cup and handle breakout BLDP. That was another really good trade from I think 2 weeks ago. September 13th, yeah, like 2 weeks ago. This was a really good one on BLDP, so that's a really good example of the setup I'd go after. This is actually exactly what I showed you guys. Morning ramp up in the first 30 minutes, pullback, found support, found a higher low, and in this case, we kind of bought the breakout. So yeah, I mean, that's just a few examples. Short side trades, I go after, I have about 3 different setups I typically like to go for. A lot of the time in the morning, if I believe that there's a reason why the stock might be a fade, I'll often short into some resistance sometimes. In this case with ZYNE, it was phase 2 data, and in the daily chart, like the daily chart had this context that any swing, anyone that's long this stock that got caught in this gap is going to use this opportunity probably to take profit or to minimize their loss. They're going to sell into this, right? So it just made sense for that to see a red daily chart candle. So I was interested in short in this case, and I actually missed the only opportunity we had to get in short was on a bounce. So again, I typically avoid 2 things. One is I avoid shorting into weakness if I can help it, and I avoid going long into strength, meaning that I don't chase stocks in either direction. I'm always letting them come to me, come to the entry where I can get a good risk reward scenario and have confidence that the trade's going to work. And if not, at least it's only going to be a small, 10 to 15 cent loss. As you can see, I take a cover pretty quickly to mitigate the risk. So if I take a quarter off in the first dip, 20, 30 cents in the money, I can now stop, break even on the rest, and just let the trade work for me. So anyways, guys, I'm not going to talk your ear off. That's just a few ideas of things I go after. I have a few different short setups that I like. Again, one of them is shorting into resistance when VWAP is coupled with it, in this case here. Let's see. That's another one similar to, again, just in this case, like with IZEA, this was like on day 2, I think. There was resistance at 340. It didn't really give me a signal to short in here, so I waited, and then finally it came right to where I wanted it, shorted the bounce to 40, anticipating resistance because it was prior resistance and VWAP was there, so there's a lot of good reasons to risk 10 cents on a trade like that or 12 cents on a trade like that when the outcome, you know, on the other side could easily be 50, 60, 70 cents. So another thing I like to go for on the short side is sort of like upside down cup patterns. So with IZEA, one pattern that I mentioned that day that would have got me in would have been like a cup like this, right? If it did that and then put a lower high at 81, in this case, I would have shorted through the 68 support. That's a pattern I trade a lot. Okay, so if it had done that, that would have got me in because the risk then would have been, you know, short 70, risk 81. It's 11 cent risk. And you can see the reward on the other side is like 80 cents or more, right? It's huge. So I love that pattern. So, but when I see something like this where it just goes and it feels like you're chasing it, I don't like to short that particular pattern. So again, it's all preference, but the more that you journal your trades, both wins and losses, the better you're going to get at knowing what setups work the best for you. And again, I really prefer, like in a case like this, the stock runs up. If it holds a support at 68, then it puts a lower high. I like to short through 68 because now we have clear risk. And especially if there's, you know, a lot of room. So you pull out your daily chart, pull out your bigger time frame, zoom out, see how extended the stock is, and see if there's room for a nice reward versus the small risk. So I'm going to leave you guys with that for now. If you are interested in, like, you know, going back over and seeing like what kinds of trades we take, there's examples, tons of examples. In the on the website under the recent trades tab, you can just go through what the risk was, where we got out, stuff like that. So without further ado, guys, I'm going to leave you with Philip for the afternoon. We had a pretty good week. Actually, guys, this is going to wrap up the month, I think, right? Yeah, so end of the month. The month in review, I mean, guys, we had a hell of a start. 3 really nice trades. First day of September, first trading day of September. There's VSTM, a great example of another early trade I'll take in the morning when weakness is confirmed, shorting into the first bounce with set risk. CBIO nailed. There was just so many good trades this month, guys. It's been a fantastic month overall. I feel a little bit sad to be leaving the morning without a trade this morning, but just unfortunately nothing really lined up for me. That being said, I'm going to be kicking around, guys. So even though Philip's on the stream, if I find a trade, I'll hop on the mic and let you know where I'm getting in and what the plan is, and I'll post it in chat as always. I really hope you guys enjoyed the midday webinar. I'm going to pass you over to Philip right now.